FFBFGodSpeaks. We have four amazing authors that we're going to get to know a little bit better in the next 40 or so minutes. And if it's okay with everyone, I'd just like to take a minute to quickly introduce the authors, and then I'll ask authors for you to give, this is an impossible thing that I'm going to ask, 2 or 3 sentences about your book, so we can jump into some questions and discussion about what it looks like that God speaks in your books, and maybe some questions that authors might, aspiring authors or readers might have for you. What a great opportunity, Faith and Fellowship, for letting authors be so close into readers. It just is such a treat, I think, for all of us to get to be able to have this dialogue. So thank you everyone for coming this evening. We're thrilled, and I hope this is a very meaningful time for everyone. I'm just going to take a minute to introduce our authors. I've asked them if they have their book. It would be great for them at some point to show their book, and I'll just start right off the bat with Tracie Morrison in the pink up at the top. Well, I don't know where you are in your box, but there she's waving. And I'll just introduce Tracie Morrison. She earned her BA in English from Rutgers University and Douglas College, and her MA in counseling from Montclair State University. And she enjoys facilitating workshops on diverse topics that help build personal, professional, and spiritual capacities of others. Outside of her professional life, Tracie is the daughter, sister, friend, writer, and playwright. And for tonight and for the Faith and Fellowship event, she is featuring a book called Prayer, Talk, Listen, Obey, Starting and Strengthening Conversations with God. So hello there, Tracie. Can you raise your book up or tell us a little bit, a couple of sentences about your book, and then we'll get deeper into that maybe as the discussion goes on.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you all tonight. So again, I'm Tracie Morrison. My book, Talk, Listen, Prayer, Talk, Listen, Obey, Starting and Strengthening Conversations with God. The basic premise is actually in the title. And I really encourage readers to take the time to talk to God, because he's talking to you. To listen to and listen for God, because he's listening to and listening for your voice. And when all is said and done, all the talking and all the listening, make sure that you absolutely take the time to obey. He wants to have a relationship with you. And that's what the desire of the book is, my heart's desire for you.
That's very cool. That's wonderful. All right. How about Betty Rodgers? Is it Kulich? I didn't ask you that the other night. Am I saying that correctly? I do not want to say it incorrectly.
It's Kulich.
All right, let me introduce Betty to you all. She's a pastor, an associate pastor at Redeemer's Church in Columbus, Ohio. Additionally, Betty is the women's ministry director for Harvest Preparation International Ministries out of Sarasota, Florida, and for Mexico and Central America. I want to make sure I say that correctly. So she is the winner of the SIPA Award, Book Award for General Fiction, The River, which she's featuring tonight, and the winner of a 2020 Albert Nelson Marquis Lifetime Achievement Award. And she hosts short vlogs and on Facebook called Life Outside the Pages, and a YouTube channel for Hispanic women. And again, your featured book for tonight, Betty, is The River, A Spiritually Transforming Journey. Can you just tell us a little bit about what your book is about?
I would love to. The River basically is a modern day version of Pilgrim's Progress with a little bit of the shack rolled into it. And I wrote it because, being a pastor, I see a lot of people who come to church and have made a decision for the Christ, but never have begun to grow their faith or had a faith walk to go deeper or more intimate with the Lord. And that's usually boring stuff in classes, and nobody wants to do that. So the fiction book that I wrote is a story of a young lady that basically goes on a journey that's really transforms her, but it's all taken place in an alternative supernatural universe or wherever she crosses over a portal and goes into this place, and it totally radically transforms her. And she learns everything that you would learn in Bible classes on her journey and the things that she does. So for someone who's not into going and sitting in classes or Sunday school things, they could read this and get the information about how to grow their faith.
Very cool. Thank you. And next I'll introduce Daniel M. Jason, and I see you as Dan Jason there. Hi, Dan. And I'm going to read a little bit or tell you a little bit about him. As an educator and Christian missionary for over a decade, Dan is passionate about sharing the journey of life with others, and he desires to motivate and inspire his readers through his first faith-based books. As an author, by sharing one story, including the mountain and valley moments, Dan's hope is to help you develop a game plan to attack life and grow in holiness. Dan believes that you can overcome the odds and achieve victory that is yours for the taking. And it's interesting to note that, Dan, your book proceeds continue the work of your global missions and outreach ministries for serving the poor around the world. Very cool. And your featured book is The Saint Next Door. So hope we get to hear a lot more about that. So why don't you tell us in a few sentences what your book is about? It's so hard, right, to do it in a couple of sentences. We call it the elevator version, but yeah, give it a shot.
Thank you so much, Susan. So The Saint Next Door was written because we're doing just that, journeying with other people. And the premise of the book is discovering God's holiness within ourselves and within other people. And oftentimes in our lives, we literally encounter saints that God puts into our life, and they could just be our next door neighbor. They could be someone from around the block, and you never know how he's going to use other people to instill his love in us, and then hopefully we could pay it forward to others. So throughout this book, I kind of share a lot of different people who have impacted my own journey, but how we can be on the lookout of God's holiness in our lives, and how it's all about practicing heaven by living love, so we can discover God's holiness within. And that's why I chose the title of The Saint Next Door. And I had the endorsement of the Bishop of Albany, Edward Scharfenberger. And one cool anecdote is the Pope actually has a copy of my book in his presence as well. So pretty cool things.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. All right. And our last author that I'd love to introduce to you tonight is Greg Ebie. And again, is Ebie correct, Greg?
It's Ebie, but
Ebie. Okay. I did
I've
not
had
ask
worse.
him. Okay, well, I'd like to say it correctly. So for the record, Ebie. In 2017, after 20 years of pastoral leadership, Greg and his wife, Susie, founded the ministry of Firm Foundation. Their vision is to help people enjoy an abundant, happy life by applying 12 bedrock mindsets to their daily lives. The acrostic "Fuel for Your Fire, Fuel for Your Life" helps people remember these foundational attitudes and begin the journey of personal transformation. As an ordained Assembly of God minister, Greg has helped people grow in their relationship with Jesus for over 30 years. And my understanding, Greg, and you may say more about this later, but this is the first of a series of books, right? And the featured book, I didn't even say that. Sorry about that, is Resurrected Faith, the Heart of the Contender. There you go. And it has a study guide, if I'm correct. Okay. And it's the beginning of a series. So
yeah, I'm excited. Book 3 has been released this week. Still working on book 2. So there's a plan. So the church faces a pandemic of dead faith today. And most Christians are sleepwalking, unaware of the impact of dead faith in the lives of their own personal walk with Christ, as well as the lives of their families and people that they love in their churches. Dead faith does not refer to our saving faith, but as James said, faith without works is dead. And the series springs out of the last little epistle in our New Testament, right before the book of Revelation, Jude. Those 25 verses, Jude is calling us to be awakened to the reality of false teachers and things that would lead us astray. And so my heart cry in resurrected faith is that dead faith can live again. Jesus likes to take what's dead and bring it back to life. And so he can cause us to have a paradigm shift in our thinking about faith, that it is not a noun that we act upon or do something with, but instead faith we need to understand as a verb that is actively working within us, empowering us to live what we believe.
You know, I'd like to just jump in real quick on, I had another question that I was going to start us out with, but because you mentioned that, and we met the authors and I the other night, and Tracie and Greg were talking a little bit about that faith. Tracie, one of you have a great term for that, for the act of faith. Tracie, what do you write in your book about that?
I think we both have it. Mine is actually a title, and then I think Greg's book actually, I guess, expands, right? And so the title for one of my subchapters is Faithing It Until We Make It. So often, you know, we talk about faking it, but we as believers really have to, you know, help our unbelief at times. And so we can believe something, but not really necessarily believe it all the way. And so instead of faking it, we are faithing it until it comes to pass. And that means every day really trying to hold on to it and allowing God and enjoying the journey as we move in faith toward that which God has called us to.
Cool. Do you have anything to add to that, Greg?
Yeah, I use that term faithing in my book to help people realize that faith is a verb. I describe faithing as the intersection of faith as a noun and a verb, that it's taking the things that we believe and seeing that they are active and working within us. In the Old Testament, faith comes from the word, Hebrew word haman, which is pictured by Isaiah as a tent peg, where the Lord said, I'd drive him like that tent peg into a firm foundation or a solid place. And that's the same word that's first used to speak of Abram, that he believed the Lord and it was credited to him as righteousness. Now, again, Abraham doesn't do anything to be credited righteous. We don't do anything to be saved. It's what God is doing in us so that we can stand firm, that we can be true to the word that he's given us and live what we believe.
Cool. Great. So let me go to the first question I was going to ask. The name of the breakout session is God Speaks. And I was just thinking as we were talking about that, maybe how that applies to your book, or how you feel like God speaks. And I'm going to just ask Betty if maybe you would have a response to that. And then we'll kind of move around a little bit.
Right. Hearing the voice of God and understanding it's the voice of God, and then obeying that voice of God when he speaks is all part of the key to growing our faith. And so in my particular book, the character of the book really doesn't know how to hear the voice of God. And through her learning, through her journey, she begins to develop that ability to hear and then make the decisions to obey. But sometimes we want to obey, but we have fears, we have baggage, we have things that really hinder us from stepping out in the word or whatever we're hearing God is saying. And so I think that's for all of us. We grow in levels and we get to a place where we're hearing God, and then
about the USS Denver. So like I said earlier, one thing led to another, and I thought, I really think I can write a book with this. So when my adult children started hearing my vision and my dream, they were very excited. My sisters were excited, and I kept it going. I had never written an adult book. I had experience in writing children's books, so I was on a pretty big learning curve, but by God's grace, I kept it going. I did get a lot of encouragement from my family.
Well, that's wonderful. And I think that's such a gift too. Do you think you're going to do another book?
That's a good question, Tracie. I want to. I love the World War II era. I really want to, but I just have to tell you that I don't have an idea at this time. And I'm really just asking God to reveal to me what he wants me to write next.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you guys a little bit about your writing life, as in tell us
confidence, and how the Lord just brings those people into your life at the very moment that you needed it. It could be somebody like when I was on a city bus and I write about a woman who I had never met before, and she got on the bus and had a big smile on her face and just was delighted to see me, and she just started sharing about her faith. And then she shared about this moment in her life when her grandson was recently killed. And I thought to myself, how can she be so faithful and so happy, even though she's going through something so difficult? And, she said, every day my feet hit the floor, it's a blessing from God. And I just want to give the gift that he's given to me to other people. So it's in those common occurrences that you have, or at the city dump in Mexico City where I do mission, and the people there that might not have anything physically, but spiritually, they're so filled up. And you go and you're willing to serve, but actually you go away feeling so much more grateful for having come into contact with them, and you could see in their face truly the presence of God. So The Saint Next Door was the title because I thought to myself, a lot of times throughout our daily life, we're actually right next to saints and we don't even know it. We're present with people. We truly give them the time of day to hear their story and to listen. We can hear God speaking to us through them, and sometimes we actually hear what we really need at that very moment.
I love that. Tracie, Greg, either one want to jump in on any of that about how God speaks? Or
yeah, I personally went on about a 3.5 month journey that really shaped the development, which came to be Resurrected Faith, but it really shaped me as an individual. I had been in ministry active for over 25 years at that point in time, and I had a mentor ask me, what was my singular heart's cry? And he used the illustration of the 18th century missionaries that went to the Caribbean to share the gospel with slaves there. When they boarded the boat, not knowing if they would ever return to their homes, to their families, they said, "Is not the lamb worthy for the price that was paid?" And I started thinking, as a busy pastor, what is my heart's cry? What does Jesus have as a focus for me? And I began to listen to my sermons, listen to conversations and prayers, looking for that. And I stumbled upon Jude, and the Lord just began to speak to me out of verse 3 in that short letter, that we would contend for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. And so God will speak to us through his words, through the scriptures, but that became a beacon to me, that I began to realize and see in new ways how we were not living according to that faith that Jude said was once for all given to the saints by Jesus. We had a faith, but it was something different than what God had originally intended for us, and we needed to try to find our way to contend for that. And so it's a heart cry that is what God has spoken, and he'll do that for all of us.
let me ask it another way a little bit, Tracie. I think as an author, I'm also a fellow author. I've written a children's book and a nonfiction Christian book. And I just wondered, do you think that God speaks to you through your writing so that your words become kind of God's words for others?
Absolutely. And I think that, sort of anytime, and fellow authors, especially Christian authors, our quest really is to ensure that what we write is really the heart of God for his people. So that requires us really to kind of tune in to what it is he's saying to us for others. And so, along the journey in terms of writing, Prayer, Talk, Listen, and Obey, this really is a compilation of prayer calendars, Lenten devotionals, different workshops that I've done. And as I sat to kind of put it together, it was, well, God, what is it? How do we strengthen, the relationships that persons who have been praying who are older than me, right? So how do we strengthen that relationship so that they don't tire and they want to run on and see what the end will be? But also for the person who's not in clergy, for the person who is not, who thinks that prayer is only set aside for the holy or the spiritually elect, if you will. how do we get them to start having that conversation? So it's really kind of having this ongoing conversation with God. God, what is it that you want? And then how do I shape this book in a way that it reaches the people that you would have me to reach? We all have an audience, you know, and a friend of mine was coming out with a book at the same time. And I was like, well, what does my book matter? And she was like, there's an audience, you know, there's an audience. And so just, you know, listen for God, obey what he's telling you to do, because there is someone that he wants you to reach, and whether it's 1, 100, 1,000, or 1,000,000, just obey and do what he calls you to do. And as you go through the process, he's speaking, make sure you don't run ahead of what he's telling you to do, that you're always keeping what he wants you to do in mind, so that way in the end, he gets the glory.
Cool. That's great. Thank you.
Can I
Mhm.
say,
Go ahead, Betty. Mhm.
for me, being very involved in ministry and stuff prior to writing, when I became, you know, started to work on the book, which was again because God spoke to me. I was just asking God, what do you want me to do next year? You know, in December, praying into the next year. And he said to start writing. And I, being a teacher before pastoring, I was a teacher. So all I was thinking about was nonfiction type of stuff. That's what my life is. And when he spoke fiction to me, that was a hard one because I don't tend to read fiction. You know, prior to that, I didn't tend to read it. And yet God can speak through fiction as equally as he speaks when you open his word, when he's flowing through you into how you do the story. And I didn't understand that. I had to trust that process. And yet when the book went out and I started getting feedback and people started saying, you know, I have always wanted a relationship with the Holy Spirit. I've always wanted to know God in more intimacy, and your book helped me to do that. And I just started crying because it's like, this is a fiction story. It's it's a pretend thing, but yet because it's given through what God does and says as I wrote it, it really affects people. And I didn't understand the power of that totally until I had 3 different ladies contact me and said, we teach women's studies in our church. One was a Nazarene, one was a Vineyard, and one was a charismatic. And they said, we want to use your book as a Bible study. And do you have devotionals to go with it? And that concept of how you would have a devotional to go with a fiction was like, just rocked my world, because it was not like what we're used to. And so I want to say that to encourage people. It doesn't matter when God speaks and says, do this for me, and you're obedient and you let it flow through you, it will touch who his audience is that he has. So I want to encourage people with that. Just go for it.
Wonderfully said. Thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, I just want to affirm what Betty was saying and affirm her as a fictional writer. Jesus was a storyteller. We call them parables,
Yes.
and they are stories with a heavenly meaning. And I draw upon the parable of the persistent widow at the end of book 3 in the Resurrected Faith series. And that book's called Winning the Battle to Live What You Believe. But the persistent widow, you know, the unrighteous judge that she was clamoring with could have silenced her immediately if he could have found fault with her. But she was living what she believed. And the picture is worth 1,000 words. If we can live what Jesus calls us to live, then we're going to silence the naysayers. We're going to silence people who would speak out against us, because we're living the truth that he has revealed within the scriptures. And sometimes people will get that through a story. Right. And the power of a story enables them to put themselves into what they see and imagine in their minds, that if it could happen for them in that situation, maybe God could do that for me as well.
Right.
Susan, could I add something really quick?
You absolutely can.
Yeah, so I think it's just tremendous for everybody sharing, because it's so true. Like when God speaks and we actually listen, such a breakthrough happens in our lives. I think sometimes people are intimidated, or maybe when they first find or hear the voice of God, they're not sure what to do with that. And I just encourage them to, try to stay in tune and to go to the scripture, but also like to read these inspirational books, because through it, you can hear other people's stories. And through those stories, you can understand and relate to how they approach it, or how what God is trying to say to them, and understand like, no, a lot of times in life, people battle this fact of that they're not worthy of receiving that from the Lord. But actually, there is that saint inside of every single person. He's calling us to that greatness. And if we respond to it, he's going to give us the tools. He's going to set up the people. He's going to show us the way, even when we don't see a way. And when we obey, it just opens up a floodgate of blessing. And then we can then utilize all the gifts and talents he's given to us to share it with others and be his hands and feet in the world, because God speaking then puts it into action. We think about, in the beginning times and when he created everything into being, that's what happened. And he's asking us to be those co-creators in the day to day as his disciples.
You guys, it's amazing. Thank you for staying on topic about God Speaks, because they asked us to talk about this and I love the topic. But with that said, I'm going to switch directions just for a minute, and I'm going to ask each of the authors 2 quick questions to give you all an opportunity to maybe kind of do a little bit of nuts and bolts about the writing part of your writing. So the 2 questions I have that could be quick answers, and then we'll follow up with that, are, is this your first book that you've written? And how long, start to finish, did it take you to write your book? Greg, go.
Okay, so this is book number, the one that just came out is book number 11. I actually wrote a first version of Resurrected Faith that was put out in 2020. A friend told me, you have so much good material in here. Have you thought about making it 3 books? So that's where the 3-book series comes. So that has been a journey for the past 2.5 years to get it into the 3 books from the 1 original.
Okay. So 3 years and you've written multiple books. Tracie, what about you?
So the first book, The Prayer Dancer, is actually one of my plays that I published. That was an epic fail. So if we ever have another time to talk about epic fails in publishing, that would be one of them. Great play, but not a great published piece. This book, I started it, probably started and stopped maybe 2013, started it, different title, didn't know which way to go, didn't know what to do. And it was really through the course of the pandemic. So over that sort of year that we were kind of silenced and in the quiet, that it kind of all came together and God spoke and was like, now is the time. So God has impeccable timing. So for those of you that are writing and sort of like, this is taking too long, he knows exactly when to do it. So if you're starting, keep starting. If you're stopping, it's okay to stop, and then just make sure you complete when he's ready.
Thank you for sharing. Betty, what about you?
Well, The River was my very first book, and it took me 9 months, and it was published right when the COVID hit. So for me, my writing journey has been one to begin as, to get those stories out for people to read. But I want to just make a comment. I want to keep on the track of God speaking through that. But I thought writing the book, a first book, whatever book, was the hardest. And then it was easy after that. But really, after you get a book out and you begin to learn the craft of writing, it becomes a big thing. And so one of the things for me with God Speaks is, when you're busy life to begin with and you're being called to write, prioritizing time for, what do you do? And so God Speaking has helped me to prioritize, I'll get it out in a minute, my time so I can do other things. Now I've kind of taken a turn where I've done some books that with other people, compilation books, and got some things published through Guideposts and things like that to learn the craft as well. So
okay, thank you. And Dan, how about you? First book, multiple books? How long did it take you to write?
So my first book was Fire Burning Within. I wrote that a few years ago, and then that's actually which led me to write The Saint Next Door. Each book took about a year. And it was in the heart of the pandemic that I wrote The Saint Next Door. Like Tracie and some others have mentioned, I learned a lot along the way in the process. And I think it's really important to take the time that you need, but also to be aware of the experiences that you're having, and just having a really good, solid game plan. So that way you can understand the theme of each chapter and how it's going to build upon it, and to take the time to pray, like Tracie mentioned, because that's what it's about. It's not about us as authors. It's about what God is trying to say, and use us as a tool and as a vessel for his message to those out there who are the readers. So yeah, just allow it to speak through you.
Right. And I guess it was a little bit of a question that I wanted to encourage fellow authors and readers that some books come naturally and quickly, and you can write them in, I was looking at 9 months or 1 year or 3 years. Some of us, Tracie, you and I took a little bit longer in writing or I don't know if you put an actual date on it. I wrote 10 years. I don't know if that's how long, but when you got serious about it, maybe you wouldn't say 10 years. It took me 7 years to write my first book. So just to be an encouragement, and I just appreciate you, Betty, saying that, just, or maybe it was Tracie that said, just write the book and don't worry about the time of how long it takes. That God's timing is what's really going to matter on that. I really, really do believe that. So, all right, we're winding down. We have about 10 minutes left, and I have not seen yet any questions come from our audience. So I'm just going to keep moving forward, if that's okay. And I am curious about, we talked, the authors and I talked to the other night, and we talked a little bit about this, but my curiosity is, what is the hardest part of the book writing process? Is it the writing? Is it the finishing? Is it the promoting the book? Dan, why don't you start us out and tell us what your perspective is on that? I'm wondering if I lost Dan. Did I lose you?
Oh, I'm still here. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure you're okay.
Yeah. So the hardest part of the process for me, I would say, would be the editing of the book, the revisions, and understanding what to keep and what to take out. Because oftentimes, like, a concentrated effort and the focal point of the chapter staying on topic and on theme, even though you have so many great ideas, it's sometimes hard to understand what is going to be the best message to the reader. So again, taking that to prayer. And I'd say another challenging aspect of it is the marketing side of it. So I would highly encourage anybody who's trying to get their work out there to utilize some professional platforms to do it. But also, I've taken advantage of starting a podcast a number of years ago. So promoting it on, public radio, podcasts, that kind of thing can help as well.
Okay. Betty, easiest, hardest part, of writing?
Marketing and learning the craft. That was another thing, because I would not put myself in the realm of a writer at all. And so for me now, Dan, he's doing the editing, but I give it to people because it's like, I don't catch the commas or the semicolons or the M dash, N dash. I was like, what's an N dash? What's an M dash? I don't know. And so learning those things has helped, and being part of writing groups. Oh my gosh. Different writing groups to get to know people. You can do different activities. They will do conferences where you will learn and meet other people, learn the craft a whole lot better, and learn their skills, the way they have marketed. One of the things I can say is that every Christian conference I've ever gone to for writing that's been put on by a group, everybody there is like, how can I help you? It's not like, what can you do for me lately to help me get my thing out there? But it's like, how can I help you? And they'll come right alongside, no matter if they've got, 80 books, they'll come around, what can I help you with, or whatever. And that's just, I love it. And it's been such a rewarding thing to see, when in the world, normally it's the other way around. So.
And Tracie, what about you? What's been the hardest part? Or
So-
easy. You can turn that question around if you want to say what the easiest part is.
Yes, the easiest part for me is the writing part. The hardest part has been the marketing. And then also because I'm a playwright, sort of, I'm learning the playwright side. And so for me, it's balancing. So because I'm coming up on the anniversary of, prayer, talk, listen, obey, I'm like, oh, let me get back over to that. But I'm also working on a play that I want mounted next year, and let me work on that. So I think it's balancing and just really trying to, you have to market on both sides. You have to learn your craft either way. You really need to stay professionally develop networking. I'm not always great at that. While, it seems like I'm like bubbly and fun. Sometimes writers can be very much introverted and we're in our own space. And so it takes a lot of work to kind of come out and be and smile and laugh and be with people. But that's sort of, the hard part, the marketing side, publicity side. Can't get these words out, Betty, you and I tonight. The publicity side, getting it out there. But you know what, all in its timing, and just knowing how to stay in your lane and really not trying to be like someone else, because sometimes you can see what another author may be doing, or, oh, wow, they're doing this, they're on podcasts, they're going to conferences, they're selling 50 million books, and you're like, oh, I sold 5 and nobody's called me. So just, kind of, again, back to God speaks. He speaks to us differently, he uses us differently, and just wait on his timing, and it'll be all right.
Wonderful. And Greg,
Yeah,
easiest,
so-
hardest, you want to share either?
My easiest part is the writing. I mean, who would have thought that from the kid who hated English in elementary school and high school, that I would grow up to become a writer. But the writing comes easily. That's probably because of 20 plus years of preparing sermons for every Sunday. I mean, pastors unknowingly are writing books every year. They're just never producing them as a book. They just are speaking them. But so the writing comes easily, but to the theme of the God speaks, and the hard part is the marketing, the producing, but we have to believe and we have to know within our knower, this is a message God gave to me for the church.
Right.
It's not just for me. Yes, it has shaped my life. It continues to transform the way that I am living my life and am living out my faith. But I have to continue to go back to the place of saying, this message isn't just for me. This is for everybody in this little breakout room. This is for every church in my community. And so making the phone calls to pastors to say, hey, can I have the opportunity to come and speak? Can I have the boldness to go ahead and ask for the podcast interviews, to get that out there? And so, one of the prayers that I pray is, Lord, take my loaves and fishes efforts and you multiply them. Because again, John the Baptist, the scripture that I hold on to, John the Baptist, when he was asked about Jesus multiplying and getting bigger, he said, no one can receive anything except what is given to him from heaven. And so whatever notoriety, however far God takes the message of resurrected faith, it's because he wanted it to go there. And I'm just simply trying to be obedient to what he has directed me to do, directed me to say. I'll walk through the doors that he opens and share the message, because I'm convinced people need to hear it, because what he's done for me and in awakening me. I mean, hey, I'm a pastor with now over 30 years ministry experience, but I still see the pain of dead faith in my life. And if we don't allow the Holy Spirit to show us those things and continue to speak to us day by day, we're all going to fall into that trap. And so, yeah, the marketing is the hardest thing. But, my first book, God's Clock, I made the mistake as a newbie author 5.5 years ago of just saying, well, hey, I've produced it. I'm going to use Amazon. Oh, hey, I can get a free ISBN number. Why should I pay for that? Frugal me. And yet, I've just closed the door to ever having that book put into a Barnes and Noble or any other bookseller, because I said it's an Amazon book. And so there are lessons that you learn. And so, yeah, if I had it to do over again, and I will do that one over again, it's like, you just have to keep learning, keep believing God gave you the message, and do the hard work of asking people to hear your message.
I love that you've said that. I had a very prolific author ask me point blank, looking in his eyes, he said, "Do you believe the message of your book?" And I was like, "Of course I do. I feel like the Lord gave me this message and it's for me to share." And he said, "Then I want you to know you are not selling your book, you're selling God's message." And that
Amen.
was a wonderful reminder for me from the marketing standpoint that was so difficult was I'm not selling Susan Campbell or Betty or Tracie or Dan. I'm selling what, and selling it may or may not even be the right words, but I'm wanting the world to know what God spoke to me to share with someone else. So that was a very valuable piece of advice that I have kept with me as I've had to do the marketing. And it looks like many of you say that the marketing piece is a difficult part. Well, I knew that the 40 minutes would fly by, and that is exactly what has happened here. So grateful for Faith and Fellowship for hosting this and allowing the opportunity for these amazing authors to have a platform to be able to share a little bit more about how God is using them and through their books and their passions. And so glad for you as the audience to join us. This was just a fabulous 40 minutes, in my opinion. I'm thrilled that we got to spend some time together, and I hope you all have a lovely evening, and we will hopefully one day meet again. So until next